The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. We are rapidly approaching episode 200, which is quite exciting. But first, we're going to take a slight detour from the Tampa area to our friends at Leaven Brewing today. It's very exciting because I have wanted to get them on the podcast for quite some time. And luckily enough, I was able to do so on a relatively recent trip. If you've known anything about Leaven Brewing, they have made themselves quite the name in not only Tampa Bay's beer scene, but also Florida in general through some fantastic beers, creative use of social media, a mug club to beat all mug clubs, and much more. But we're actually going to start off at the beginning. So we sat down with Jillian Lynch, who, along with her husband, KJ, created Leaven Brewing out of basically nothing and started this phenomenal roadside strip mall location just outside of Tampa. I'd probably say it's maybe halfway between Tampa and Plant City, where our last interview with Keel Farms was located. But enough about me. Let's go ahead and chat with Jillian as we talk about the early days in forming Leaven Brewing. Enjoy. But let's start with the name. And I would assume that there is a bread connotation, but more so the what, and then of course the why is really intriguing.
Yeah, so we were sitting on our couch in South Tampa, and there were a stack of magazines over to the side, and we had decided that we were opening a brewery. And so as we're tossing around names, we pick up the magazine. It was Zimmergy, so it's a brewing magazine. We came across the phrase leaven. And so if you look at leaven as a noun, it's a transformative property that changes something for the better. So we are transforming grain for the better by making it beer.
You weren't a teacher at all.
Never.
No, not at all.
Never.
Now, it's funny because I know that when this podcast is being recorded, you're going to be going to Fort Myers later on, which is home for you and your husband. So I guess talking about the Gulf Coast beer industry, how has that sort of changed in the time that you and your husband have really sort of taken note and then taken part in the industry? And what kind of positive and maybe even not so positive things are you starting to see in craft beer in this section of Florida?
So, I mean, my craft beer journey probably started with my dad, who had craft beer in the fridge. So I remember North Coast. Is it North Coast Red Seal? Or is it Red Seal North Coast? Facts. And so I would pull the beers out of the fridge and start to draw the labels because I was a very artsy kid. So, of course, my dad was like, "What are you doing? Taking the beers out of the fridge," kind of thing. So fast forward, World of Beer becomes a thing. And so my 21st birthday was at World of Beer, and I lived in Fort Myers, which had a local brewery that was brand new. I think they started maybe like 2008. Don't quote me. And so, met my husband, who was the first official head brewer there. And we just got to see, I feel like, the beer explosion, right? We got to be a part of it on the consumer end. And so there are so many breweries now that are non-existent in that area. But I have such fond memories of, it was the game. It was how many craft beers could you try? And so having entered into, being part of craft beer on the other side, I feel like overall I've watched the bubble pop a little bit. It's like the common phrase people are using.
I've noticed it seems to be, especially with 2024, was not the greatest year for craft breweries here in the state of Florida.
I think it was 9 craft breweries in Southwest Florida closed all last year. And so, you know, it's I feel like we're in this plateau of watching consumerism of beer change, general interest change. And I think that's maybe why we're doing so good at Leaven, is because we kind of put beer second, which, you know, I feel like a lot of people would say is a faux pas, but people come first here.
And that's really one of the things that's interesting about Leaven Brewing is you've got this sort of public facing view that isn't necessarily beer as much as it is culture. Mm-hmm. What was sort of the reasoning behind that? Because it is very different than pretty much every other brewery in the state.
Yeah, I think a lot of thanks can be said to Fort Myers Brewing, because they just really gave us the space to live what was craft beer. Or at least for me, I don't know. I feel like I really lived it. You know, I was a consumer, and then having met KJ, I was in the fold a bit. So all of their big events, you know, I'd be brought on as a bartender for the day. And so that was really cool. I got to see, you know, the ins and outs of it every day, and also had, you know, I don't know the right word, but like the liberty of just sitting in their parking lot chatting with people. And so when I tell you that we had the greatest group of friends, everybody had a nickname. We knew we were there on a Friday night. It was just so much fun.
By that time, when did you make the move from Fort Myers to Riverview, which is, I would assume, a little bit different? Because let's start with this question. Is this Riverview? Is this really, you know, Riverview is its own central location? Or do you consider, you know, yes, we're in Riverview, but it's Tampa?
So if we take it back to where we were in Fort Myers, they opened in a warehouse. And so, you know, they just had this thing going for them that wouldn't work today. They didn't have many chairs inside. I don't even think there was AC inside. And so people were bringing camp chairs and drinking in a parking lot. And that creates a community, and it creates culture, right? So
I'm pretty sure their logo was the best beers that you can have in a parking lot.
Yes, and that didn't come till later, you know. People were just organically doing that. And so I think that gave me a really good, like, space to grow up in beer, if that makes sense. It was a really good example of how people just take care of people. And it really wasn't about the beer at that point, right? It was about going to see Roger. It was about going to see 3 Star. It was about going to see my people. And the fun part was I got to drink beer while I did it. So fast forward, KJ and I got married, moved to Tampa. We got married at Coppertail, which is really cool. Fun fact.
Seriously? That's
Fun
awesome.
Fact.
That's a great place. I mean, beautiful location. What can I say?
It was so much fun. I was teaching at the time, taught 4th grade, and KJ had moved on to Brew Hub, where he was one of their contract brewers. And at some point, KJ just looked at me and was like, "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" I was like, "We're going to open our own brewery." And so we lived in South Tampa, but you don't pay rent in South Tampa and try to open a brewery at the same time.
Whose parents did you move in with? Was it yours or was it his?
Yes, it was my parents. So luckily they have a mother-in-law suite. Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Okay. Beautiful.
So it wasn't quite living with them, but we were right up in their backyard.
Gotcha.
And so we learned from Fort Myers that you had to go to the place where the people were. So South Tampa, really cool. We looked at a couple of places, realized we couldn't afford the rent. But it was also transient, you know, there wasn't like a neighborhood where you get regulars. And we very much were seeking like putting down roots and becoming a part of a community and just being something, you know, a part of something greater.
I was going to say South Tampa really is ruled by MacDill Air Force Base, I would assume. And so the transient nature is very strong.
Right.
Was it, what was it about Riverview that said, okay, this is where we're going to be?
I wish I could tell you and like impress you with my knowledge about how many people live here. We did look into that a little bit, but we picked a suburban mecca. And, you know, we joked in the beginning that craft beer is for soccer moms too. because it felt very much like craft beer was like a culture in its own and wasn't necessarily like the suburban mom kind of drink, but we have so many examples of it being that when we were hanging out in Fort Myers. And so we just looked for where the neighborhoods were.
But I would say, and I would love to hear your opinion, Lee County, which is where Fort Myers is, Southwest Florida, craft beer is a very different beer scene than Hillsborough County, Tampa, which is in a lot of ways world renowned for being the epicenter of craft beer, even over places like Jacksonville and so on. Was it difficult to adjust to the Tampa way of brewing and the Tampa way of operating a brewery over what Fort Myers was doing?
I think there was a little bit of a culture shock, but not really. So when we were in Fort Myers, we were already friends with a lot of the people up here in Tampa. And so we were already accepted into the little beer circle pretty quickly.
So there was enough people that are coming down from Tampa to Fort Myers to try what was going on over there?
Yeah, so I think more like in the way of Brewers Guild events, having KJ working for Fort Myers, we were constantly going to Tampa Bay Beer Week, and we were becoming friends with people on our own. In the beginning, I think I heard the nickname that we were the sweethearts of craft beer, because everyone's like, they're so nice. This little couple, they say they want to open a brewery. You know, they're, I think, rooting for us, but probably going, they have no idea what they're getting themselves into.
Did you have any idea what you were getting yourselves into?
I don't want to sound like pompous, but I think I kind of knew. You know, like I said, we got to really watch what Fort Myers was doing. KJ was doing the hard work of the brewery at the time. I would say there's a lot more to the business end that was invisible. Obviously, I wasn't talking taxes with them. But I think we understood that it was a business first, and then we had to make good beer. And so, lucky for me, KJ is very smart and very wonderful, and he wouldn't have entered had he not understood, you know, the numbers portion of things.
Gotcha. And how difficult was it? Because I'm pretty sure you are the only brewery still in Riverview. You know, you are in the middle of a strip mall that is catty corner from a high school. How difficult was it working with the powers that be here to bring a vision that I assume would be very strongly influenced by a brewery that was already established, but in an industrial park in the middle of nowhere like Fort Myers Brewing?
When we were looking for spots in Riverview, actually, if you look at our drunk history, which is pretty funny.
Which is very funny, actually.
My best friend literally Googled yada yada in Riverview, and this location popped up. So thanks, Mel. But we thought we were going to more or less copy what Fort Myers had going on, because we saw it work. We saw that you didn't need Roman columns to build a brewery. It didn't have to be beautiful. It could be a square box where people drank beer inside and were happy to be there with each other. And so when we were originally seeking, I think we found out real fast that there's not a neighborhood that butts up to warehouse space in Riverview. And so when we went seeking other property, we're here in the shops of Boyette. And I can't say that my landlord and I are like, you know, going out for ice cream on Friday night together. And I can't say that they quite understand what we're doing here, but they exist. And because they do, we do. And we're constantly trying to introduce ourselves over and over to them so that they can see kind of what we're doing here. Which
is amazing, because you're established. I would say at this point, you know, you are a known entity, especially in the Florida craft beer community. You've got, I would say, a prime location, because literally it's a sort of an obtuse angle and you are right in the center. I find that amazing that they aren't pushing more, as I would assume people would go to the businesses and then come to you, if not for beer, just for a quick lunch or dinner or something.
I think they just don't understand the brewery model. So a lot of the things I've tried to do here, I've gotten a lot of pushback on. But I think they're looking to host more of like a Chili's corporate kind of place, and you got me, and I've got all these weird ideas, and so they're just confused at the end of the day.
But you're Riverview. You're not Brinker International or something.
That is correct. Yep.
So.
Just us, just KJ and I, and constantly telling them this business exists. It is in existence to feed my family and now 15 other families. And I just find it wildly incredible that we have built a space that allows that many people to make a living.
What about Riverview as a municipality? How difficult was it to work with them? And do you continue to have a relationship with the city as an entity?
Kind of. So like Riverview is Hillsborough. And so when I was doing all of our paperwork, I'm going downtown to the very tall buildings, and we were going every day. And nobody would see us because, that kind of paperwork just takes forever. But when you show up every day, you start to notice things about how every Wednesday morning somebody was bringing donuts up to the floor. And so there was one morning where I beat that person to it, and I brought the donuts, and I said, I don't know who I'm bringing these to, but I really need to have a conversation with somebody. I brought donuts. And so, it's Hillsborough, it's paperwork. It went exactly as you expected it to.
It's amazing how much work gets done through those channels, and not the traditional fill out the form and wait the correct amount of time and then something happens for you.
That's right. That's right.
And I guess it's surprising for Hillsborough because that is the county that is well known as the epicenter for the Tampa craft beer scene. I don't know if it really is now, but back then it's like, obviously there were some big names that were in Hillsborough County. I would be surprised that they weren't more receptive to working and getting as many craft breweries in as possible to replicate the success of a place like Denver or Portland.
I don't think Riverview is seen as a part of Tampa in that way, which doesn't bother me. We've always said that we're on the fringe. So like one of our beers that we bottle on certain occasions, certain anniversaries, is called King of the Fringe. It was a nickname given to us. And yeah, we're happy to be on the outskirts, so I don't tell people we're Tampa. I say we're Riverview. We're in the suburbs of Tampa.
Do you have some of the Tampa beer scene, some of the stalwarts and some of the people that enjoy that consider to be Tampa? And do you have, especially your husband, when it comes to the beers that he is making, is there sort of an expectation and a stress to make sure that it's up to a certain level and a certain style?
What I will say is right now, Taylor is our head brewer, and he's been doing great. So, in talking about like rewind 2 minutes, 4 minutes, KJ understood the assignment that eventually he was going to get pushed behind a computer, and that's exactly where he's at right now. So he's not back there brewing, and we have Taylor and Dennis, and they're just killing the game. They're doing a great job. Taylor comes with a lot of really fun ideas, and I think craft beer for us has always just been such a friendly place. We've always gotten along and felt so supported. So it's not really like brewing up to Tampa standards. It's like more brewing to impress Tampa friends at times, right? I've never felt like we have been awarded the best beer in the area award. But every time I talk to someone, they tell us we make a really solid product. And I just take that as a big round of applause.
Do you consider a Tampa-style brewery to be distinctly different from a Fort Myers-style brewery? And if you do, would you consider Leaven to be one a little bit more over the other?
I think what Tampa has going for it is that they just are the epicenter, right? So when it's Tampa Bay Beer Week, they get people who bounce from A to B to C to D, and we just get left out because we're on the fringe. We're just a little too far to drive after you've had beers at Berry House, Coppertail, Common Dialect, like you're not going to now drive out to Riverview. It's just not going to happen. So we are more of your neighborhood Cheers, and we are more in our own little bubble. And I mean, I look at KJ all the time and I'm like, leave me alone in my bubble. I'm happy to be here. I don't seek being anything different, but it really is a luxury being so close to our friends who have, that epicenter as their home.
Absolutely. And as you built the bubble, were you the first ones in this location?
No, this was 1,000 things. This was a Cherries, and then it was a barbecue place, and then it was something called Amberjack's Bar and Grill, and I'm pretty sure some other things.
So what did you have to do to make this the vision that the two of you had, or that especially you had, for what a tap room was going to look like, way back when you were sitting in a parking lot in Fort Myers?
This is where I think we did not do so great. Looking back at little baby me 8 years ago, I probably should have looked at my lease a little closer. I probably should have negotiated a few things, but it's made us who we are, and it's been really fun. But there's not an inch of this building that I haven't touched. When it came to the floors, there were 4 layers, and we were going to Home Depot and renting this thing called the Ripper Stripper. And so on my Instagram, you can look back, we're pushing this giant machine around that's just chiseling away at the floor. We built this wood wall because I saw it on Pinterest. We painted everything. We went up and dusted everything. We had to rent scissor lifts. We were doing more construction in the beginning than I think a lot of people had done in the moment, but it made me appreciate what we had so much.
Which is funny because looking at the tap room, it has got this homey, it's like this half industrial but half homey feel, and it's very distinctly the image that you have cultivated. So it's a little surprising to know that you were not the first ones in here. It almost feels like it was built for you, which is amazing.
Right. We could have left the bar. So the bar ran parallel to the wall over there. Obviously, y'all listening at home can see exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, we'll definitely put pictures up on social media.
But we realized that if we left this place looking like it always was, it wasn't going to feel like people were arriving to a new spot. So we went in and we just there were demo days. We were pushing down walls. We were trying to save materials. I remember spending a whole day taking nails out of, pieces of wood and then only to scrap it. But you don't know what you don't know.
And what's interesting is that, kind of like I had mentioned before, there is a natural crick in the building. There is an angle right here which is almost focused on. It's kind of an amazing piece of architecture that I've not seen any other brewery sort of have. And
you call it amazing. I call it annoying. This building is preventative of an appropriate seating layout. And also, my brewing space, we highly underestimated ourselves, how much room we would need back there. And so the boys make it work in such a small spot. Kudos to them. But yeah, this whole building just doesn't make sense.
But it does in a sort of...
Oh, thank you.
a bootstrap sort of a way.
Yeah.
Which is
wonderful. Let's call it that.
In addition to micro brewing, our interests have also been sparked by micropigmentation of the scalp. What exactly is scalp micropigmentation, you ask? That's a great question. Scalp micropigmentation, also known as SMP, is a non-surgical hair loss solution that uses specialized pigment and equipment to replicate the appearance of tiny hair follicles on the scalp. SMP creates the illusion of a fuller head of hair or a clean buzz cut look, creating a more youthful appearance and restoring your confidence. At New Beginning Micro, Steve Rivera and his SMP artists specialize in custom treatments tailored to your specific hair goals and needs. And the results look super real. At New Beginning Micro, the experienced artists blend pigment perfectly with your natural hair color and skin tone for ultra-realistic results. Most clients say people can't tell the difference even up close. If you're interested, visit New Beginning Micro at newbeginningsmp.com today. And be sure to use promo code FLBEER1000, that's FLBEER1000, for a huge discount and to let them know that the Florida Beer Podcast sent you. And that is it for part one of our interview with Jillian at Leaven Brewing. Make sure to come find us next week for part two, where you can find out all about the continued story of what Leaven Brewing is going to be doing. Special thanks to our sponsor, New Beginning Micro. If you are in the Tampa area and you are looking for hair restoration options, New Beginning Micro is definitely the place you want to check out. If you check out our last episode 197, you can learn all about what they are doing for their patients and microderm pigmentation. If you are going to check them out, please use code FLBEER1000. That's FLBEER1000. And that'll make sure that they know that you heard about them right here on the Florida Beer Podcast. Our podcast is produced by Flintstone Media. If you are looking for a full-service podcasting house or just trying to get your podcast off the ground, the people at Flintstone Media are the people to go to. You can find out more about them at flintstonemedia.com. If you're looking for the Florida Beer Podcast on the internet, we're on all the major socials as floridabeerblog.com, our web-based other half, shall we say. You can find us on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and actually also on Facebook, but that is FL Beer Blog, just so you know. Email us at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. You can find us on any podcasting app of your choice, Apple, Spotify, iTunes. Even your smart speakers will be able to play the latest episode of the Florida Beer Podcast. Just ask it to do so. And if you are following us on a podcasting app, please do us a favor. Give us a nice big 5-star review. That really does help us get the word out about Florida beer. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for Flintstone Media and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is David Butler, your host and author. We will be back next week with part 2 of our interview from Riverview with Leaven Brewing. In the meantime, make sure to enjoy what you're drinking, where you're drinking, as long as you drink Florida craft.